Hey guys, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and today we're going to be talking about how Amazon and Silicon Valley seduced the Pentagon, that is, the U.S. Department of Defense. Now, this reporting was absolutely fascinating from ProPublica by authors, and I've got notes here, obviously, James Bandler, Anjali Tsui, and Doris Burke. And if I pronounce one of your names wrong, I apologize, but excellent reporting, guys. I'm a huge fan. Now, if you don't know who Roma Laster is, you probably should. Roma is a Pentagon employee who is responsible for policing conflicts of interest within the Pentagon. And on August 8th, 2017, and I have a ton of notes here, a lot of it verbatim from this article, I think summed it up quite nicely. And basically, she emailed an urgent warning to the chief of staff of who was then Secretary of Defense, James Mattis. Now, several department employees had arranged for Jeff Bezos, he is the CEO of Amazon and founder of Amazon, to be sworn into an influential Pentagon advisory board, despite the fact that in the year since he had been nominated for that board, Bezos never completed a required background check to obtain the security clearance. Now, Mattis at this time was about to fly to the West Coast where he would personally swear Bezos in at Amazon's headquarters. And basically what ended up happening is phone calls and emails began bouncing around the Pentagon on this issue as a result of Laster's email. And basically they canceled it. They did not go through with the swearing-in ceremony. Security clearances obviously are not a trivial matter for the Department of Defense of the United States. And so despite this, Bezos actually met with Mattis that day, and apparently Mattis also had other meetings with executives from both Google and Apple. In other words, the massive tech companies within Silicon Valley. Now, when Bezos met with when Bezos met with Secretary of Defense Mattis, here was his focus, and I quote, Amazon wanted the department to abandon its hodgepodge of 2,215 data centers located in various Pentagon facilities and run using different systems by an array of different companies, and let Amazon replace that with cloud service, basically Amazon Web Services as well. Now, this vision that they had back in August 8th of 2017 when Ms. Laster sent this out is pretty much becoming a reality. The Pentagon is preparing to award a $10 billion 10-year contract to move its information technology systems to the cloud, and Amazon, obviously running AWS, the largest cloud provider on the planet, and I believe it's definitely in the country, but I believe it's also the largest in the planet as well, is the number one person or the number one contender for this, and it seems like AWS is going to be getting this contract. Now, Bezos and Amazon are not the only ones, obviously, and Laster actually basically did her best to enforce these rules, talking about other companies. She challenged the Pentagon's relationship with not only Bezos, but also Eric Schmidt, one of the founders of Google, who was the chairman of that defense board that Bezos was going to join. Now, as a result of this, Laster is essentially a whistleblower in that sense, and she was pushed aside. She was removed from the Innovation Board in November 2017, but remains in the Defense Department as of literally today when this article was published, and so I assume it's still today. And I quote the article, which was basically a DoD official that didn't want to be named, Roma was removed because she insisted on them following the rules. Now, Laster later filed a grievance on this and said, and I quote, I've been betrayed by an organization I joined when I was 17 years old. Laster, who is now 54, and I continue. This is an organization built on loyalty, dedication, and patriotism. Unfortunately, it is kind of one way. Now, if we are looking at this from the defense standpoint, in defense of the United States, the Pentagon's technological infrastructure obviously needs to be updated. If we are looking at over 2,200 data center locations run by a multitude of various companies, that is an awful lot of coordination, and streamlining this through something like Amazon's AWS service would make it a lot easier for the Pentagon to manage their infrastructure, probably their defense as well. But I think this speaks to a very interesting issue here, in the sense that we have massive corporations out of Silicon Valley that would be able to handle something like the Pentagon. We're talking about Amazon, Google, and Microsoft. And I know Apple is building their own data centers right now, but they are not in that game near to the level of those three. But what does that look like worldwide? I mean, we have a lot of different compliances that require, government compliance regulations to only allow U.S. citizens access to sensitive data or physical access to equipment. ITAR compliance comes to mind, and I know the DoD has several other compliances that they fall under. But should we really be awarding this to a third-party company, especially one that has been known to basically data mine, for advertising and other purposes as well? I've done multiple videos on Amazon and Google and Apple, and now, unfortunately, Microsoft with Skype and all of this, where we are thinking some of these things are secure and they're not, or they're simply allowing third-party contractors into this. Now, we know that Amazon also has been working with other government agencies as well outside of the Department of Defense. They spun up a $600 million data center that is apparently independent and very secured for the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States, from everything that I've read. So this would be Amazon obviously continuing to integrate their services into the U.S. government. But then at what point does the government see, okay, we are trusting Amazon with all of this, and what controls possibly are people like the Department of Defense giving up? Does it make more sense for them to build a unified and streamlined data center or data centers, if you will, and have it administered by a single organization or entity, or build out their own group and do it internally to ensure operational security, as opposed to turning it over to an Amazon that may potentially have some issues? So I think this is a very important question that we need to ask. Amazon is also one of the major, employers in the United States, and one of the major hosting development companies in the United States, and one of the infrastructure designs, and they are competing with a multitude of different verticals right now, with everything from FedEx to Walmart to take your pick. And now they are very, very heavily integrating into the United States military. And I think that is something that we need to look at. And I think it's something that needs to be addressed. I'm not saying Amazon doesn't necessarily deserve to be awarded the contract, but what assurances do we have that an Amazon or a Microsoft or a Google or anybody else that would be technically a third party outside of the U.S. government can actually maintain, sustain, and secure that data in a way that is to a standard to the Department of Defense? And even if there is, let's say, a conflict of interest between the DoD and an Amazon, Google, Microsoft, etc., how is that resolved to satisfaction by the U.S. government to ensure that security is maintained? So I think that's important questions we need to ask. But again, this ProPublica article goes into a lot more depth on different aspects of Silicon Valley. I think it's something that everybody should read, but it was a great read, and I hope you guys enjoyed this snippet of it, and definitely the concern that we have with one of the largest data miners on the planet possibly hosting all of the DoD information, Department of Defense. So with that, that is your news of the day. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And as always, stay safe and stay online. Thanks, guys.